With spring training now in the rear view mirror, we look ahead to the 2025 Blue Jays season. Hey everyone, welcome into Long Ball. Rob Wong, joined alongside by Toronto Sun Blue Jays writer Rob Longley here for the season preview edition of Long Ball. And Rob, a lot of excitement coming into the year, as there always is, of course, but a lot of new faces, some new additions, whether it be Max Scherzer, Anthony Santander, or Andres Jimenez. A pretty strong performance by some players like Bo Bichette during the spring as well. But when you look overall at this Blue Jays team, what do you think the biggest strengths are for this ball club?
I think somewhat predictably, Rob, the biggest strength would be defense. I mean, that's been a point of emphasis for this team for the last couple of off seasons, almost to a fault, given their inability to score enough runs to win enough baseball games. But they've gotten even better defensively, quite simply by adding Andres Jimenez as the second baseman, one of the best, if not the best, infielder in baseball defensively anyway. And when Dalton Varsho is back by the middle of April, they'll have one of the best outfields defensively as well. So, you know, that remains their strength, and that remains a point of pride for the front office, a team that can be amongst the best in baseball defensively, and I think they're living up to that again. The rotation would have to be considered a strength as well, with a bit of an asterisk, because so much of it depends on health, especially of the older guys in the rotation. And I'm talking about Chris Bassett and Kevin Gausman and Max Scherzer. And if you do the math and add up the age of their collective right arms, it's about 110 years. So the Jays have done a good job in keeping their starting pitching healthy over the past number of seasons, and they'll need that to happen again. But there's something to be said about a veteran rotation like that. And when you mix in Jose Barrios, the machine, La Maquina, as they call him, who just gives you consistency every night out there. And then Bowden Francis, if he can live up to anything near to what he was in September last year, then that rotation would certainly be among the best, if not the best, in the American League East.
So when you look at the weaknesses for this ball club, it's really something we've been talking about for a couple of seasons now, but that has been the lack of power and home run pop. Now the Blue Jays have added a guy in Anthony Santander who hit 40 plus home runs last year and is one of the bigger run producers in the American League. So that obviously helps things. But when you look at this lineup, Rob, is it still maybe fall short of some of the other teams in the division that the Blue Jays will be facing this year?
Yeah, it certainly does. Last week, Rob, I asked you how your slider was. Today, I'll ask you how your swing is. And I've asked many people this question, and it's somewhat of a rhetorical question and somewhat poking fun of the situation. But who's the fourth best hitter on this team right now? I mean, we all talk about Bo Bichette and Anthony Santander and Vlad Guerrero Jr. as being a pretty potent combination, whatever order they hit together. But beyond that, who's going to emerge as the fourth and the fifth best hitters on this team? Is it going to be Dalton Varsho when he gets back? He's had a really good spring. Is it going to be George Springer? Likely not, given how he's performed the last couple of years and still seems to be on the decline based on his performance in spring training. Could it be Alejandro Kirk, fresh off of that new contract? They certainly are impressed, management and coaching staff anyway, with the way he's approached his hitting in spring training. He's worked well with new hitting coach David Popkins, as a number of the hitters are. They quite like his approach to coaching, and there's certainly a possibility of some uptick from him. I mean, I guess if you're an optimist, you hope for some uptick as well from Jimenez, who couldn't hit very well in Cleveland the last couple of years, but has hit successfully earlier in his career. But, really, it's the depth of that order. You talked about it, Rob. They did add some pop, and I think Santander is going to be a huge addition to that offense. It's going to be interesting to see who hits the most home runs, him or Vlad. But they really needed one more bat, and they certainly need others to step up, Bo Bichette among them, and I would expect a huge campaign from him. But they're really going to need a fourth and a fifth and even a sixth guy to step up and contribute offensively for this team to be effective in scoring runs.
Well, they banked on internal improvement last season, and obviously that didn't come to fruition. So hopefully lightning does not strike twice on that side of things for the Blue Jays. So we mentioned all the new players and new faces that are going to be in the mix, but are there some players that you're just really interested to see this year? We know a guy like Alan Roden made the team for at least the first few weeks here while Dalton Varsho's on the IL. He's gotten a lot of talk, of course, over spring training, even from general manager Ross Atkins. I mentioned Andres Jimenez and Max Scherzer. Are there one or two guys that you're going to be really interested to see, at least in the early part of the season?
Yeah, I think three stand out for me, and you've mentioned two of them, Rob. Let's start with Alan Roden. I mean, there's a lot to like about him. He's certainly had an outstanding spring down there, hit the ball very well. Manager John Schneider loves the intensity that he brings in his attitude, and thinks that he's going to be a big leaguer, an impactful big leaguer going forward. But I think more importantly, in the case of Roden, is this team has done such a poor job over the past handful of seasons of developing prospects, particularly on the position player side and the hitting side. And Alan Roden is a guy that they've developed organically. He was a third round draft pick, and he's moved up through the ranks and developed really nicely. And he came in, as you mentioned, Rob, to spring training, where Ross Atkins said he was the guy he was looking forward most to watch of anybody in camp, and lived up to that billing, which is, to me, really kind of shows a little bit of whatever character that he has, and the talent that he has. So it's going to be exciting to see what, if any, impact he can have early on. And I would expect that he gets the opportunity. I mean, I would think they'll give him as many at bats as possible. Obviously, when you have a future Hall of Famer like Max Scherzer and all that he's done in the game, and all the Cy Youngs and all the All-Star appearances that he's been through in his career, it's going to be pretty cool to see what he does. Certainly, the Jays are breathing a sigh of relief in that he seems to have moved past, for now anyway, that thumb issue that cropped up late in spring training. But beyond that, he looked brilliant. He looked really good. Like, he looked in his peak form throughout his starts in spring training. And this from a guy who only had 8 or 9 starts or whatever it was last year. So he's a real presence on the mound. So I think fans will enjoy watching him. And they've slotted him into the number 3 spot behind Jose Barrios and Kevin Gausman. We'll see him, if all goes well. We'll see him pitch Saturday against the Orioles at the Rogers Center. I think that will be very exciting. And to me, and many have talked about this, and I had a long feature on him today in the Toronto Sun and all the Postmedia websites. Bo Bichette. I mean, everybody knows it was a disaster for him last year for so many reasons. He was very demoralized with the way that he was playing when he was healthy. He had 3 separate stints on the injured list. He only played half the season, 80 games or whatever it was. And this is from a guy who led the American League in hits for 2 of the 3 previous seasons, and has proven himself as one of the elite young hitters in baseball. When I spoke with him in Dunedin, he seemed really driven to prove what kind of a player he is. And as he put it to me, he wants to put on a show. And everybody who's watched and followed Bo Bichette throughout his career knows that he's very capable of doing that, of putting on a show. And if he can do that and inject some of the old Bo Bichette into the Blue Jays offense, it could be a huge season for him, and a credible turnaround for that offense for the Blue Jays at large.
Yeah, it's a big season for Bichette personally, of course, and for this ball club, with Bichette heading into the final season of his deal before becoming a free agent potentially. So we'll see what happens there. Lastly, we look at the rest of the division, and heading into the winter, Rob, there was a lot of interesting questions about what would happen. Juan Soto, of course, ends up leaving the division and going to the New York Mets, but the Red Sox make the addition of a guy like Garrett Crochet. The Yankees then suffer some pretty devastating injuries, including an injury to Garrett Cole for the rest of the season. And even this first week here, Gunnar Henderson, the star shortstop for the Orioles, is not going to be available. Neither is Grayson Rodriguez, the up-and-coming pitcher. So the division maybe not as scary looking as it maybe was a couple of months ago when you started to project it out. But when you look at this Blue Jays team, how do you think it stacks up against the rest of the AL East?
Well, despite some of the things breaking their way with some of the misfortune on other teams, it's still, for my money, is still the stoutest division in baseball, top to bottom, and that makes it a challenge. I've heard it said a few times that there could be 4 and maybe all 5 teams that are kind of hovering around 85 wins. It's that tight. You would give, I think, a little bit of an edge to the Red Sox. I like the improvements that they made, and I like that for the most part they have skirted the injury bug. But the Yankees were good last year, man. They won the division, they won the American League, and if they can get by these injury bugs and survive, they've got enough depth there. They've got enough offense, they've got enough veteran presence on that team that they could certainly be a factor. And Baltimore won the division 2 years ago, so you can't dismiss them. Your tendency would be to maybe toss out the Tampa Bay Rays, but do that at your own peril, because every year they seem to come up with a new way to contend. So, Yeah, I think it's a very tough task. If you're a Jays fan and wanted them to be in the postseason, you'd much rather than be in the American League Central. But having said all that, there is a fair bit of optimism leaving camp that they can compete with these guys, and for all of the reasons that we spoke about earlier, maybe a slightly improved offense or significantly improved offense if things go well, and the defense and starting pitching staff. But yeah, it's going to be a battle, as it always is in that division, and I think we'll see that again once again in 2025.
Yeah, it goes without saying a strong start is really
Yeah,
crucial for this Blue Jays team that just stumbled out of the gate a year ago and was pretty much done by the end of May. So hopefully that does not happen again, because we'll have a lot to talk about one way or another, I think,
yeah.
if it goes sideways for this Blue Jays team in 2025. But as always, leave your thoughts in the comments section below. For Rob Longley, I'm Rob Wong. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.